Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about are just a real quick um, rundown of the 11 basic systems, organ systems of the body, just who they are, what they um, do, and some of the main components of them. We'll be basically our semester is divided by each one of these systems, and it goes over in this particular class. It goes over, I believe, almost all of them. Um, right in the semester in one single semester, but there are other classes. You may also be a part of this class where it goes through all of these in depth, much more in depth over the course of 2 semesters. So just throwing that at you. So the first one I want to talk to you about is the first one you encounter. It's the integumentary system. It's the one on the outside. It contains the largest organ of the body, which would be the skin. And in humans, this is one of the most interesting ones. Humans are known for a couple of things, but one of them is actually for being really sweaty and really stinky. And that is facilitated by the fabulous cutaneous layer known as the skin. But it does a few other things. It keeps all the inside parts on the inside. It keeps the outside parts on the outside. Certain types of cutaneous structures, such as hair and nail, offer unique types of protection, which we'll look at also a little bit over the semester. Included in some of the functions of the integumentary system are things like specific vitamin types of synthesis, helping us sense our environment using pain, pressure, or temperature. That's just a little bit. The skeletal system is one of the ones that is in the top two, the most difficult ones for most students to learn. And that might be because there's so many very interesting and very differently, literally shaped and functioning parts of it. The skeletal system is primarily made up of the bones and what we refer to as the articulation points or the joints. Um, so bones we can all think of as providing a scaffold, an inner scaffolding layer for muscles, organs to, and connective tissues to attach to. However, it plays also very important roles in things such as blood cell production and the storage of certain types of mineral hydroxyapatites, calciums, and the like. Whoa, aren't we made of this? So muscle, a large percentage of animals including ourselves, have devoted quite a bit of time and effort to specializing this particular muscle group, or tissue group, sorry, known as the muscular system. So the musculature of the body allows us primarily motion, but it also works as an insulator um, an insulator, a temperature regulator, actually adding heat into the system. It maintains things that we take for granted, where as just sitting there relaxing, you might not be thinking you're engaging too many muscles, but quite a few actually are, just to maintain posture. Also internal working parts of the body, such as the stomach, the small intestine, the heart, all that good stuff, those have different types of muscle tissue, which we'll look at through the semester, all of which are centered around maintaining pressure and continuing motion. Um, right, and of course producing heat, keeping us warm. The nervous system is one of the two types of communication systems of the body. Uh, the brain, the nerves, the spinal cord, this is all exemplary of, well, the brain and the spinal cord of the central nervous system. And then, of course, there's the peripheral nervous system, which we'll look at. And that goes to the periphery of the body, or the outside. It sends and it receives information. It's like a big, quick email system of the entire body. Most of it, unfortunately, works on negative feedback. Um, but we'll look at how some of the complexities, such as the neural networks of the brain, allow us to have complex thoughts and make us who we are. The endocrine system is sort of like the nervous system. Yeah, it relays chemicals back and forth, but it's the snail mail version. So instead of doing it quickly, such as the nervous system is relying on electric-like type chemical impulses, the endocrine system is a longer type of communication. It requires usually longer and larger time frames. Whereas some of them are very quick, such as those produced by the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys, fast-acting fight or flight types of endocrine secretions. Others are slower and timed over sometimes months and years, such as the pituitary gland, for example. The cardiovascular system incorporates the circulatory system, so circulation means things are moving and flowing. Usually what we're using this particular system for is transporting different types of nutrients or waste products in a very quick way, in a very large scale way around the body to be processed by the organ systems. So things such as taking in oxygen from the lungs, circulating it to all of our cells of our body, and then also simultaneously pulling up waste products that need to be excreted or perhaps nutrients that also need to be circulated. The lymphatic system, similar to the cardiovascular system. Actually, they at one point were joined together. Um, So it still is maintained in some animals as hemolymph, the hemolymph system, but we've separated and designated them out. So the lymphatic system works primarily in the cleanup crew arena. It's often linked to things such as immunity, but what it mainly works as is kind of a cleanup crew to take long leaching waste products or water or ions or whatnot out of the interstitial fluid or the fluid in between the tissues or the cells in any of the matrices. So that's a long leaching process to kind of clean and filter those out. So the lymphatic system kind of grabs onto that and holds on and pulls it, eventually dumping it back into the venous system to be recirculated out and processed by the body. The respiratory system, now that's an interesting story, but we'll get to that. But right now, just think of it as giant gas sacs inside of your chest, which originally were used to help us float around, but now just allow us to have a thin kind of transfer barrier between capillaries, or a component of the cardiovascular system, where we can perform a gas exchange based on pressure systems. So we can absorb things like an appropriate amount of oxygen. We can also release things like waste products such as carbon dioxide using the respiratory system. The respiratory system is also integrally linked with the top part of the digestive system as well. Here it is, digestive system, one of my favorites, personal favorites, mainly because it involves food. Right. It's also one of the oldest systems that we have, arguably. It's very complex, very highly evolved. It has its own brain, actually. A lot of people say your second brain is in your gut because there's so many neurons there. There's tons of neurotransmitters. High proportions of serotonin are used in that particular region. That's all true, but arguably it's actually our first brain because we had that part there initially. So those gut feelings, they may lead you right, they may lead you wrong, but they are definitely there. Um, the digestive system is the system we use to take in food, sense our environment in a lot of ways, digest and pull out nutrients, and then excrete on a large scale wastes as well. There's many components that we'll look at that help process unique components of our diet, such as sugars or fats or whatnot, but we'll get to that in a bit. The urinary system is, although relatively component lacking, consisting primarily of the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra, possesses some of the most complicated fluid and ion filtering systems that we have seen anywhere. The kidneys alone are incredibly interesting in how they pull and extract specific forms of waste metabolized by the body and are able to put back out appropriate sodium and ion balances as well as water balances. The reproductive system is actually twofold, but the truth is it's all one and the same. Everyone begins off life as the template, which is female. So if you can think of something like what's the default sexual morphology in humans, it's female. It's just later on when the SRY region on the Y chromosome kicks in that we start to masculinize some of those traits. So we see here in this individual, we have penis, testes, scrotum, vas deferens, and prostate. These are all analogous components to parts of the female reproductive anatomy. And we'll look at that a little bit later. That all comes together through developmental anatomy, which we kind of touched on that conceptually earlier. So the female reproductive system, first thing I should address is the mammary glands or the breasts. As shown here as part of the female reproductive anatomy, But I should make it a point to say that males too can develop larger breasts, but do have naturally the ability to produce and secrete milk as well. And it all works on the same system. So the other components of the specifically female morphology are the ovaries, which are analogous to the testes, uterine tubes, uterus, and vagina, which we'll all look at those components and how they work later on. Oh, I should probably say this right. Of course, the reproductive systems are used in reproduction. We use these systems to mix our genomes up and shuffle the genomic deck in order to give evolution the advantage of all of the different offspring that we can produce. It's super important that we're sexual reproducers. If you notice, not a lot of kids from one family look identical to each other. The brother has brown hair, the sister has blonde hair, he's tall, he's short. All of this variety allows for two individuals to come together, shuffle their genomic cards in such a way that they produce almost these novel phenotypes to the environment. Some of those phenotypes worked out really well and are retained in our current populations. Others did not work out so well. We don't see that much of them anymore, or none at all.